let's bring in some people. I'm super excited to be having this conversation. First of all, because our panelists are awesome human beings, and also it's been a while since we've had our last conversation with Katie. So I'm excited to get back into the swing of things. Um, and I think it's going to be a good one. So today our topic is Earth Matters, and we have two panelists who will introduce themselves shortly. Um, so I am going to start off with a quick intro of myself. So I'm Chaeli Mycroft. I'm a co-founder of Chaeli Foundation and the global ambassador for the Chaeli Foundation and Chaeli campaign in South Africa. Um, I am really happy that we have this platform of conversations with Katie because it's allowed me an opportunity to introduce people to the amazing human beings that I feel privileged to know and work with in different ways. And it's also a way to learn about what these phenomenal human beings that I have in my life. It's a way for me to learn about their work as well while sharing it um, with our different platforms. So, that being said, um, I'm going to uh, move to Kehkashan to do a quick intro of herself.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Kehkashan. I'm from Toronto, Canada. I am a United Nations Human Rights Champion, Forbes 30 Under 30, and winner of the 2016 International Children's Peace Prize. And most importantly, I am the founder president of Green Hope Foundation, which is a global social innovation enterprise working across 25 countries that has impacted over 142,000 plus people so far over the last 9 years. I started it when I was 12. And yeah, that is a bit about me.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll chat more now about your work. Next up we have Reece Slade. Hi.
Hi everyone, I'm Reece, I'm 17 and I'm a environmental and children's rights activist from Cape Town, South Africa and based in South Africa. I've been involved with the Chaeli campaign and the Chaeli campaign ambassadors, which has been monumental for my activism journey. I was part of that delegation to the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates in 2019, where I was the runner-up for the Turner Social Change Prize for my project, EarthKids.org, which is basically what we do is we're a nonprofit organization that creates early childhood development tools out of recycling and plastics. And at the same time, encouraging young people at the preschool age to learn about the environment. So that's a little about me.
Awesome. Thank you. Um, for everyone who is here, please feel free to use the chat and introduce yourselves in the chat, where you're from, where you are currently. And awesome. We're gonna just have a chat, and I'm gonna ask some questions, and we're gonna just see where that goes, where it takes us. So the first question that I'm gonna ask is gonna go to Reece, and I think, can you share? And obviously these questions go to both of you guys. Can you share a little bit more with us about the work that your organizations do on the ground?
Starting with me.
Yes.
Yes. So what we do is we make early childhood development games out of recycling and plastics that we collect from different schools and businesses around the area. And early childhood development games is basically preschool games that help kids develop their fine motor skills, their gross motor skills, everything that's important to get a quality education and be able to cope in school. And then we donate those to the under-resourced communities and preschools in Cape Town, and then also implement recycling systems at those schools. So it encourages young people to start the trend of recycling as well, especially in areas that are neglected often, even when it comes to garbage collection. So recycling isn't even something that is conscientized about or known about because proper needs aren't being met at the current moment. So that's a little bit about what we do.
Awesome. Thank you. Kehkashan.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, Green Hope Foundation works across 25 countries, and our basis is education for sustainable development. And using that, we work across all aspects of sustainability. You can see in my background that we work on localizing the sustainable development goals. And because we work in so many different regions and communities, our solutions to address the different challenges are also like very broad. So we are strong advocates for ground level action that is driven through education for sustainable development. That includes, us doing our sustainability academies, which we've done over 500 of all across the world, which are like tailor-made workshops and conferences led by young people for young people. We work on, installing solar panels, solar street lights in marginalized communities, toilets, working on clean water and sanitation, especially during this pandemic. And I'll talk about this more later, we work on feminist climate justice. So like really working in communities that are affected most by climate change, and particularly their women and girls being affected most by that, and ensuring that we are able to provide them with climate education that helps them to adapt, mitigate, and rebuild from the climate disasters. And then we work on peace and nuclear disarmament, really all aspects of sustainability. And most importantly, we work on partnerships for development, which is goal 17 of the SDGs, and really seeing how we can work together in a way that is intergenerational, multi-stakeholder, and taking into account everyone's perspectives. So for instance, we focus on, as I mentioned, the world's most marginalized communities, which include the Syrian refugee camps, Rohingya refugee camps, homes for children of prisoners in Nepal and Kenya, homes for HIV positive children, orphanages, and at the same time, working in urban environments in partnering with different school boards to ensure that sustainability education becomes a part of the curriculum. And in places where that's not possible, especially in the vulnerable communities, we continue to provide non-formal sustainability education. So we link all of that together, and we work to create a holistic learning and working environment where particularly children and youth are able to thrive and get the skills to live their life to the fullest.
Amazing. I love that so much because I think that I can relate to with our work through the Katie campaign and Katie Foundation, because we're also very holistic in the way that we work and the way that we address the challenges of the people that we work with. I think it's also important in this moment to contextualize that Kehkashan, your organization has been around a lot longer than Reese's organization. So you mentioned you've been around for 9 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, like Green Hope and myself, like I started when I was 7, so like 14 years.
Cool. Yeah. So you guys have been here a second. I think Earth Kids Org is 2 now. So so I think that also makes a big difference in how you are able to diversify the work that you're doing, because you have had time to test things and learn things and grow. Even though, Reece, you are like a powerhouse networker, and I have never seen somebody who has friends in so many different places, and that's just amazing to me, and it really speaks to how we can build activism into our everyday lives, because it's not just what we do, it's who we are. So I'd love to do a story time now. So I want to know from you guys, what was the big catalyst for you to like become an activist or to start an organization? Like, what was that moment for you guys? Let's start with Reece.
So I think growing up in a place like Cape Town, where it's so diverse and so many inequalities are so evident and in your face, it sort of raises you up to be more conscious than a lot of other people around the world. And that definitely had a lot in pushing me towards activism. Also being involved with the Chaeli campaign since young and seeing that young people do have the ability to do things. And then especially, I think it was 2018, was the International Children's Peace Prize in Cape Town. And I went as a Chaeli campaign delegate. And that's where I saw Kehkashan's story about Green Hope and all the other young people, amazing winners. And that really inspired me to start my own activism journey, especially about the environment. Which I was so passionate about and still am passionate about. But yeah, that really inspired me to take the next step. And then with advisory with so many other people that I had met through those networks, it really got me to sort of bring together an idea that can make my activism possible and get my word out there.
Awesome. And you've managed to merge your passions really in a really cool way, and I think that's sort of how we're gonna get things done without society, is just remembering that people can be more than one thing, and we need to embrace and harness that idea more, that we can address multiple issues at the same time. So Kehkashan, what was your aha moment for activism?
Cool. So I grew up in a very empathetic household. I watched my parents go out like every weekend to distribute food and clothes to the underprivileged. I grew up seeing my grandmother have a terrace garden where she grew her own food. And, I always understood that taking care of our people and our planet was something that everyone did because that was our moral responsibility. But then when I was 7, I saw the image of a dead bird whose belly was full of plastic. That was very disturbing to me, gave me sleepless nights, and that kind of burst my bubble where I realized that there is something wrong with our planet. And when I started talking to other people about it, and specifically other children, I realized that my upbringing was not the normal because a lot of people didn't have that empathy for people and planet. And it was also around that time I attended a lecture by environmentalist Robert Swan, who said that the greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. So that really resonated with me. And I decided to start my sustainability journey by planting my first tree on my 8th birthday. And my birthday is also World Environment Day. I mean, I knew that all throughout, but once my bubble burst, I realized that, maybe that is my life's mission, to be an eco warrior. And I started working towards that. And Green Hope Foundation was founded because, I'd worked on the ground for several years prior. And then when I was 11, I got involved with the UN. And at 12, I was at Rio Plus 20, which was at the time the largest sustainable development conference. And then out of like 50,000 delegates, I was the youngest at 12. And there were only like 4 other people who were under 18 there. And that was really saddening to note that. And that was when I realized that, maybe I could use my expertise to ensure that other children and young people, and especially children, could be more involved in this whole process. And then on my return home, I founded Green Hope Foundation, and there's been no looking back since then.
Yes, I love that it's your birthday on World Environmental Day. It's like the universe knew. The universe was giving the planet to you. And I really love that. Like, as I love that this is a panel of young people, because I'm all about young people being completely confident that they are competent human beings who can bring huge change to society. And I think it's just awesome that we've kind of found our groove of activism pretty early on in life, and so we have more time to figure out how we're gonna make that positive impact. So now, in your opinions and through your work, how do you think that other young people can get involved, not only in your work and your organizations, but how do you think they can be active in the fight for climate justice and climate action and accountability and all of those big things that we need? Kehkashan, do you want to start?
Sure, yes. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're strong proponents of localized ground level solutions and for addressing an issue such as climate change and moving towards climate justice. That is paramount, that we need those ground level actions, and that when every single individual takes those actions, we make sure that, that's a collective action to save our planet. So, every single community and region faces different challenges. But one thing that is common and that I always say is that, educate yourself, educate your family, and educate your community. That is the basis. If you're not aware, you can't take action. And, you learn every single day. So, like, try to see what your local challenges are, try to see how you can address them. And if you can't address it, connect with others and see how you can work together to address that. It's not about starting a big organization. It is just about taking that first step and changing your own lifestyle. And if every single person did that, we would be able to create a lot of change. A lot of people say that, these small actions don't count, but they really do, because like, the high level talking about it is important, sure, but you need to translate that into ground level action, and specifically for climate change is so important. So yeah, I'd stick with education being the commonality in all of these actions, and then moving forward to address your local challenges. And that's something that every single young person can do.
100%. I think that leads really well into Reece answering that question. While you answer that, though, additionally, we have a question for you about your work specifically. Of what kind of games do you create through eco. But that can be a secondary question.
Awesome.
We'll
Okay,
answer.
I'll start with the first one. So I definitely agree. I think there's so many local things that can be done. And the really important thing, I think, at the moment is for people to recognize that there are local things to be done and that there's not one way to save the environment. And there's so many multifaceted things and so many things you can do. I remember wanting to start off with my activism, seeing Greta Thunberg's story and everyone protesting in Europe, and I wanted to be involved, and I thought that this was a future in the way we were going to save the planet. But being in Cape Town so far away, I wasn't really in a position to fly to Sweden, especially because flying is bad for the environment, nor was I able to take a boat to climate conferences. So I think it's really important to see the privileges you have, and whatever you're granted with, you can use that to serve either locally or internationally, whatever space you're in, to help the environment. So whether that be just recycling and noticing things on the beach, picking up litter, I mean, it's really the small actions that I think change the mindsets of people and start that pay it forward mindset that carries on. And if we can really just sort of create a culture that sustainability is good, and not only good, but necessary, then we're going to start moving forward to a brighter future or a safer future. Yeah. Should I answer the second question?
And how? Oh, sorry. Yes.
The second
Yes.
question was, it's in the chat, isn't it?
What games do you make?
Awesome.
eco?
I should have actually brought some out. But what we make is we get everyday throwaway objects, things you would typically throw away, and make them into games. So for example, we get stilts. We make stilts out of tins and really simple stuff, but that can be used for gross motor skills. And then we have skipping ropes made out of plastic bags, single-use plastic, and all of that. And then Kindle. And then, okay, yeah. So things like that, and hopefully I can show you all a bit later.
Thank you. I I think there's a bit of a technical issue there, but I want to throw a question in here where what is your view on when people say things like in the face of all of the challenges that are around in the world today. We're living through a pandemic. Um, there's the level of poverty is unreal. So in those sorts of contexts, how do we justify and explain and encourage people to focus energy on climate activism and climate change as opposed to spending all their energy on ending hunger? Like, how do you think, how do you make that argument? I'm just being devil's advocate right now. Reece, do you want to start off with your thoughts?
Sure. I think the way we should be looking at it is that if a solution or a project is truly sustainable, it will have more than one effect for the good of humanity. And in that case, through all activism, it should be helping lots of different issues. And I think so many things are connected that even if you don't necessarily aim to do that, it will happen. So when we look at things like sustainable cities and zero hunger, if we can create sustainable ways to make farms and planting things and then solving the problem of hunger, but then still encouraging the ecological lifestyle and more green living. I think that's the sort of mindset that one should adapt.
Cool. Thank you. Kehkashan, do you have something to add?
Absolutely, I agree with that. The issues are interconnected. And, the first and most basic thing is that if we don't have a planet to live on and thrive on, then, what's like, you can't do anything else to address any of the other issues, because a dead planet means dead human beings. So that's not going to work. So we need to understand that the planet has, and addressing climate change with being one of probably the greatest existential environmental threat there is, we have to address that if we are to bring about any kind of progress. And as Reece was saying, with sustainability, it is connected. And, sustainable development has three pillars, and that's the society, the environment, and the economy. So all three have to work hand in hand. And just to be like specific, well, most people I don't know if they ignore it, or I think that there's not enough awareness or education about how intrinsically climate change is connected as an amplifier and exacerbator of all our other world's challenges. I was speaking earlier about feminist climate justice, and we talk about gender inequality on the ground in vulnerable communities, but when climate change hits those communities, it literally amplifies every single one of those inequalities there. That includes increase in gender-based violence, that includes women and girls not having access to sexual and reproductive health and rights and products. It ensures that, it exacerbates hunger because, with ecosystems destroyed and with the rise of temporary shelters as well, it creates this huge kind of gap and a lack of peace as well. So we have to understand that climate change is a very big issue. It is connected to all of our world challenges. And just like, using your example of zero hunger, in some of the communities that we work in are agricultural societies. And by, with the regular floods that are destroying their lands, if they plant crops that with the urban demand that comes in that are not conducive to that environment, it means that when climate change hits them, they suffer from shortage of food, and that leads to economic downfall and a host of other issues. But if they plant seeds that are conducive to that environment and are able to thrive in waterlogged soils, then they are able to have a more sustainable future. You're addressing climate change in that way and ensuring that humanity is able to thrive. So, it is really connected. And your other point about addressing poverty, again, climate change amplifies the amount of poverty that is there in the world. And with hitting disaster zones, it just ensures that more people go into poverty. So if we want to address the number one goal of the SDGs and before that the MDGs, we have to address climate change as well. And that is why, more than climate action, it is about climate justice, because it is all connected and we can't forget our environment when we're addressing any other challenge.
Yeah. Thank you. I also think that it's creating new challenges that people, the big people, the people who make the decisions as the world likes to see it, is making people ask questions. Like the fact that we now have environmental refugees, that's a new thing now. That's adding to other challenges. So that 100% I agree with your point. I also think that I think when we discuss climate change and climate justice, it's often seen as a very big picture thing, and we need to save the whole planet. And that's a really hard thing for people to get your head around, that we need to act as individuals so that we can save the whole planet that everybody lives on. And that, I think, in some ways can be quite overwhelming and quite a lot of pressure. But I also feel that we need to have more spaces where we can talk about the simple things that people can do to act more responsibly when it comes um, to protecting and supporting the planet. Um, and getting some input to ask our um, delegates, I guess, some questions. So I'm going to put Nancy on the spot now. Hi, Nancy. um, Nancy is a phenomenal woman who works with us at the Katie campaign. We've known her for decades, and I wanted to ask you how you, or if you include this kind of discussion and these kinds of topics in your in how you teach your students and how you work with the kids that you work with. How do you build in this kind of discussion with them without it being completely overwhelming and um, keeping them engaged in the conversation?
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
You know what?
Loud
The
and
most
clear.
important thing that I'm always preaching. I'm a teacher, and I'm also a Kelly campaign facilitator. The most important thing that I start with learners is talking about littering, and to show them that it's important to know about littering and recycling and climate change. And by starting with littering and showing them what they can do with all sorts of things that they're throwing away, it makes them more and more interested and motivated to want to know about climate change. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Nancy. We're
Thank
really
you.
excited that you're here. Um, and maybe we should connect Nancy with Reece and see what you guys can do together. Um, but we can have that discussion offline, I think. But thank you for your input, Nancy.
Thank
Um,
you.
because this topic is like so big and so all-encompassing, I think it's important to recognize that I'm gonna bring in 2 points here. The first one is that everybody is kind of needed to make the planet objectives happen. Then we need to have everybody considered in the actions that are taken, right? So I think this is one of the interesting challenges that exist when dealing with climate justice and climate action, because the way that people approach this topic is so vast all the time, and people come from different angles and for example, we have like the recycling people and the people who are doing the striking and the protesting, and you have the people who start the movements for specific goals, like the single-use plastic movement. And And then you have the big policy change discussions. And I think all of those things are really important, and they all need to be discussed and embraced in different ways. But how do we make that process inclusive? And how do we make it all encompassing? Because there are vulnerable groups, and see, I'm bringing in disability now because I can. There are vulnerable groups and marginalized groups who people like to focus on when it's convenient to a movement, but often the objectives of a movement do not consider the needs of those marginalized people. Turn this into a rant because that's one example is the whole banning the straw, which has had the disabled community negatively. And even though that's affecting the planet positively, I feel like often uh, uh, that it's alienating people from your overall mission of saving the planet and like keeping the planet clean. So so how then do we keep those kinds of questions in mind? How can we make movements when we make decisions on those movements? How do we keep all of the marginalized groups in mind when we create these ideas and the strategies? So I think, Reece, do you want to go? We've chatted about this a little bit.
Spoken a lot about this, and I think it's really important to look at because climate change and the earth is such a broad issue and it literally affects everyone on earth. So it really needs to be one of the most inclusive movements that it can be, and it needs to be. And I think an important thing to remember is often, especially at local levels, we often think of ourselves as consumers, as responsible for always saving the environment and making conscious choices, whether it be refusing a straw in a restaurant, for example. But we also need to look at sort of the people in higher places and think about what's being provided to us, because it's not always in our power to necessarily have control of all of these things, even if we are creating a higher demand, but there's still people providing these things that turn out to be the only options. So when you're at a restaurant or something and you're offered a straw because straws are being manufactured at huge rates by people, but we also can't ignore the necessity for which straws were made, or which they should be used for. For example, the disabled community who need aid in drinking, or for the OCD community who can't drink out of cans at restaurants, things like that. And we need to sort of prioritize these things that seem to be terrible for our environment or are terrible for our environment. Instead of looking to completely ban them, try and refocus where they're being aimed towards, or at what state or rate they're being manufactured and for what reason, and then also for the way that they're discarded. I mean, it's not as if that we have to get rid of all these things. It's more like we have to come up with alternatives. So straws, the option will always be there, but you know what? Maybe that means creating straws out of not plastic, excuse me, out of potato skins that have been dried instead of single-use plastic. And then through that, you can create a lot more farming industries in places that grow potatoes, and perhaps potato skins that get taken off for like processed chips and stuff. That's waste management as well, because now you're using that potato skins that would have otherwise been thrown away. And there's a whole new market for that that can create new industry. So I think an important thing is not only to look at climate change and climate justice and helping the environment as getting rid of different issues and different things that are destroying our environment, but rather introducing new things and finding the new opportunities.
Awesome. Potato skins. I would never have thought of that. Thank you for that input. Kehkashan, what are your thoughts?
Yes, I agree completely. And I think that we have to have an alternative in place. And, we can't just tell someone to disrupt their way of life because that's not going to work. And you're going to have backlash from that. We need to ensure a just transition. And that is something that is so important. And one of the main ways that we can become more inclusive. And just to add to your point, Reece, that we use bamboo straws and metal straws. So, like, that does help, and it's not like just stopping something but finding the alternative. I think that the media here plays a very important role as well, because right now, particularly the Western media, promotes this one size fits all solution, and that's not going to work. To both of your earlier points about the protests and strikes, I mean, that works maybe in one part of the world, but in communities where children, for girls especially, where education is a privilege, that's not going to work. But if you give the child the education, and that's something that we see every day in the communities that we work in, when they don't have food to eat, you give them food, you give them education, give them sanitation, you are creating a change maker, and they're able to bring about change their own zones of influence. So again, I strongly believe that education for sustainable development really helps to ensure that empathy for people and planet, understanding how important the local solutions are, and that everything isn't about striking and protesting. Everything is about making sure that you do what's best for yourself and what's best for your family and your community, and of course the planet. And that is from a more human side. Just from the more environmental, physical environmental side. Mangroves. Now, Green Hope Foundation has planted over 5,000 mangroves globally, and we work in like in the world's largest mangrove forests. However, in like Hawaii, for example, mangroves are seen as an invasive species. So we're obviously not going to go plant mangroves there because it's bad for the environment there, and it takes away from their natural environment, and it destroys the planet in that small segment, basically. So it is about understanding what solutions are needed, how not everything is going to work everywhere. And yeah, I think that really helps with the inclusivity, and again understanding that the Western hegemonic ways of thinking need to be dismantled, and really we need to understand that people have different lived experiences. We have to recognize that. I think that it is happening. Like when I started out that many years ago, it was a completely different environment, and at least now we are understanding that we're having these conversations and we're taking action. So it is a slow process. I think there's still a lot to be done, but there has been a lot done as well. But yeah, I think we have a long way to go in ensuring complete inclusivity, and once we do that, I think we can accelerate towards a more sustainable world, not just helping our planet, but also our society and our economy, where it's not just about monetary gain, but about, social equity and environmental justice.
Yeah. Thank you. I think both of those are important points. And I'd just like to add just there, I think it's in all of these discussions, I think the biggest issue is that people are not being met where they are. Like people are being told like oh, everybody needs to be vegan now, and like we all need to start composting everything and live a zero waste lifestyle. And that's a lot to 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 start at. So I think one big thing is that people need to, like, when we are being activists for climate justice, we need to take baby steps sometimes and nudge people along the way towards a more sustainable way of life. And then the second thing I would like to just throw into that whole conglomerate is that there has to be way more consultation um, at the start of anything. Because when you include people in the process of creating change, they're gonna want to be a part of that way more than if you ask for input once you've already decided what the best route is. And I think that's like I keep coming back to this like straw example, but I think that would have been a really powerful message as well in like showing the importance and the diversity of the disabled community when you include them in the discussion around single-use plastics and how do we create a straw that still works for everybody. We've seen like 17 different alternatives and people can use maybe two of those. Um, and even still, for some people, the plastic is the way that works best for them. And so I think we need to find a balance between encouraging people to join the movements and be a part of the activism, but also not guilting people into action because there's no other option. Um, so those are my 2 cents on that. I think I want to wrap up this part of our discussion with this question. So we've all been at this activism thing for a second, right? And it's very much a part of our lives and what we want to achieve with our lives and what impact we want to have and the legacy that we want to leave. So my question for you is, first of all, like what do you see your legacy as? And then secondly, what at what point do you feel you would be successful as an activist in your mission? So I'm gonna leave that with Kehkashan.
Cool. So I would say that, I'd want my legacy to be about, again, localized ground level action and empathy and honesty, hard work, optimism, hope, and passion for bringing about change. I think that is something that I have tried to live by my entire life and my entire, process of activism and what we do at Green Hope Foundation. And that's something that we try to propagate to others as well. And I think that's something that I'd like to leave behind. And as an activist, for me, I see the successes and it's not just about that ultimate end goal, but really about the small successes that I'm able to achieve. Whether that is, providing electricity to an entire village that is driven by clean energy. I mean, that is for me a huge success to ensure that people are able to live sustainable lifestyles where the planet is also benefited. But of course, my ultimate goal is, to achieve a more gender equal, more peaceful, a world free of nuclear weapons, a world where, climate change is not there and the climate change is for the better and not for the worse. But yeah, that is my ultimate goal. But again, it's not about that once I achieve that level of success, I'm going to stop as someone, as an empathetic, responsible global citizen. My work is going to go on forever because once we achieve that sustainable world, we have to work to maintain that. So for me, it is about looking at those small successes, seeing how we can look at that, learn from that, and then scale up and try to move towards more of bringing about a positive change. So I think that I'd also like that to be a part of my legacy, that we see those everyday successes and really, especially addressing a wicked problem such as climate change, understanding that it's not about just the like, it will take time, but just keep going, look at the small successes, and I'm sure that if we move towards that goal together, we can achieve a more sustainable world.
Awesome. I agree. Thank you. Reece, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess my answer, I hope, touches on everything we've discussed today. I feel that it does, but I feel that because climate change and the earth and environmental protection is such a huge issue that includes all of us, we really have to work at it as a community, as a unified humanity. I can openly say that starting out my project, I definitely felt in the beginning there might have been sort of some competition, I feel, especially between different movements and organizations when, perhaps someone's doing the same project as you, but is a little bit more successful, which ultimately isn't the goal, because if you're working for a sustainable environment, you know what, and if there's other people working for it too, if you can get there together, no matter what different ways you take, that's a success. So I think it's really realizing that it's a community effort. And through that as well, I've been able to recognize, speaking about earlier, about how the media represents the one fits all narrative. I think it's important to realize that, especially as my role as a white South African in a community that's predominantly white and is quite separated because of the history of our country, I can't necessarily bring all the solutions to making people live sustainable lives if they have completely different lifestyles to my own. But I can go in and have conversations, and we can encourage that and conscientize, and then people can be motivated to start those lifestyles themselves. So I think it's really about not necessarily looking at yourself as a leader of a project only, but as a person joining a community and pushing the community as a whole to work towards this bigger issue of climate justice and climate safety. And an example of this, I feel it works well with my project, Earth Kids Org, because we work with young people specifically. And me as a white South African going into predominantly under-resourced communities of different races than my own, I think I speak to the young people, and it's amazing because they are so open-minded. And then we have stories of, we introduce recycling to them and recycling systems. And then this one time, I remember a teacher was telling me a girl went home the day before. She was about 4 years old, and she saw her mother throw away a plastic milk bottle into the bin. And she said, hi, mama, which is no in Xhosa, the language here. And she said, that must go in my bag to go to school tomorrow. So then that started, we can really see how young people become the vector of change in their own communities. And you know what, that child would have been more effective than myself telling that family to start recycling. So I think it's really important to look at it as a community work and getting the young people especially to encourage that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wanted to come in very quickly and just agree you on that. And we've had examples of like children who are exactly that age, 4 and 5, where one of our youngest members, I mean, now she's a bit older, but when she was 5, her dad like threw something on the street and she made him go back there in front of everyone, like pick it up, put it into the right bin. But I do agree with that. And just to add another point that, it's not about like what someone else is doing. You asked about success. I think that so much of the time we dedicate to seeing what someone else is doing, what someone else's successes are. But at the end of the day, if we are to bring about a peaceful, sustainable, more equal world, it has to be selfless and about the people and the planet, and not just about your own fame or anything like that. So I think that's a really important point. And as we move ahead, like move forward now, it must be talked about and acted upon. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally back that idea. I feel like the the killer of movements is an activist's ego, I think. And um we need to embrace that selflessness a lot more and think more about the causes that we are fighting for rather than us getting our names on big plaques and big trophies, because that's not what it's about. It's about much more than that. So in closing, I am going to ask one more question. And so that will be, I think let's start with Reece with the answers. So just quickly, what is your message to the world and the people? More than the world, what is the message to the people in your circle? Because I think it's really important to have these big ideas, but what are you gonna say to the people that you have influence over or with about climate justice and activism?
I think my message I'd like to share is that, especially looking at my project, how we literally create educational tools out of garbage. Um, we must think about, there's so many ways to look at so many different things. And all it takes is a resourceful mind to make the most mundane objects or the most useless objects into functioning projects that are gains for society. So I think really just have that resourceful mindset, think forward. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. And Kehkashan.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate some of my previous points because my message would be, again, educate yourself, educate your family, educate your community, localize your actions and take those ground level actions. Be honest, work hard, be passionate, do what you love, and don't take shortcuts. Don't do it for the media and the fame or anything like that. Do it because you love doing it for the planet and the community. And I think that if all of us took that one small step, we would be able to create a better world for all. So, the change begins with you. And especially just as young people, I think we can drive that change. And if we do it from the ground up, there's so much that we can do.
For sure. Thank you. I think that that is a beautiful place to end this conversation for now, because obviously it has to be an ongoing conversation and a dialogue, and we got to get everybody involved. And just thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us and to share your ideas and your thoughts. And I'm so grateful to you guys for educating me on these things, and including me in your your journeys as well. I'm excited to see where it takes us. And it can only be positive places. So thank you, everybody. Have a beautiful day further wherever you are, and stay safe.